Hey everyone, I'm Dennis Fisher. That's Jackson Roilf. We're from the Censys research team, and today we're going to talk about a critical vulnerability that is being exploited in the wild in Langflow, which Jackson, this is not something I was familiar with before this week, I have to say. I think this is probably because like AI is taking over everything. And when I when I looked into this, I was like, oh, there's a specific Python module for actually just building agents, which I guess makes sense, but it was not something that I had thought about. Did you know about Langflow before you dug into this bug this week?
No, I didn't. I didn't
Yeah.
actually. And essentially, it's just an interface for building AI agentic workflows,
Okay.
and relies heavily on Python. So accepting Python code is a core feature of Langflow through their API, and that's where the issue lies.
Yeah. So this vulnerability, I think, was disclosed maybe last week, but the information about it being exploited in the wild came out earlier this week. Tell us a little bit about the bug itself and the exploit activity that we've seen.
Yeah, so Horizon 3 did a write up on the exploit and how it works. It's where I got most of the technical information from. And there's an endpoint that is set up to only accept imports and function definitions in Python. And that should be fine because function definitions don't, when they execute, they just define a function. They define code to be run in the Python namespace, but they don't execute anything.
Okay.
But they discovered a way to use Python decorators, which are Python expressions that return functions that wrap other functions. And if you if you use a decorator in the function definition, then when the function is defined, the decorator run the code, and that's where you can embed malicious commands or code. And the same thing can be done using default arguments in Python. Same idea. When the
Okay.
function is defined, it executes the code in those arguments.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. A decorator is not a word that I would normally associate with like computer programming or exploits.
Right.
That's funny. So how does like what's the most likely exploit scenario? If you're an organization or an individual that's using this, what would you be most concerned about?
Well, there's a couple things. We noticed that the exposed instances, if they don't restrict public access to the API, you can hit the API directly and see the version.
Mm,
So, of the around 1,200 exposed hosts that we saw, about half of them responded with a version. And of those, more than half reported a vulnerable version, and the other half reported a patch version, which is good. But
yeah.
the majority of those hosts we saw in cloud hosting environments, particularly AWS, had the majority. So if your organization uses AWS heavily and uses things like Python and AI for your work, you probably want to double check that you're not using Langflow exposed, and if you are, make sure it's running the patch version.
Yeah. What would be the result of a successful exploit against this bug? I mean, what are the consequences we might be looking at?
Code injection, yeah, malicious code injection. So but the sky's the limit with what you can do there. But um, as far as full impact, you know, full takeover possibly.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen quite a bit of discussion about this bug, on forums and mailing lists and stuff in the last few days, which is kind of interesting because it, at least to me, kind of an obscure, um, you know, bug itself. It's not like it's in, you know, a security appliance or something that we see all the time. It's just kind of like a lesser known thing. But I wonder if this is, even though you said we only found about 1,200 exposed instances. I wonder if this could be one of those that kind of like hangs around for a little bit as people, like if they're starting to use this and spinning it up to do things, in the future and don't realize that, oh, there's this bug that's in a couple of versions we need to be careful about.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is kind of obscure, like you said. You hadn't heard of the product before this, neither had I. Um, but yeah, if you're using it, you want to get a patch quickly. I'm not, and the fact that it's actively exploited,
Yeah.
so people are going to have eyes on it pretty quickly, and you just want to get on top of that.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, this is a little bit like not off topic, but a little bit. I feel like we're seeing more and more actively exploited bugs, or more just being exploited quickly than I can recall in, say 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I feel like almost every day I see something that's added to the Sysakev catalog, and they're
Yeah,
not, and sometimes there's three or four a day or like eight in a week. And you're like, God, like, what is happening? I feel like it's just accelerating. I don't know. Maybe it's just like anecdotal, but I don't know if you feel the same way about it.
yeah, I've noticed that too. A lot of times in the open source projects and products, you see
Yeah.
that more, but especially with exploits like this, where it's not that complex, and there's write-ups about it, so you can find out how to exploit it pretty quickly, and there's
Right.
proof of concepts all over GitHub. Yeah, it's crazy, and yeah, it's just it's so easy to exploit. Just a few GET requests, and you can embed code. So hopefully people patch it soon.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So if you're using one of those vulnerable versions, please patch it. You can find all the info in Jackson's write up on the Censys site. I'll put the link in the show notes so folks know where to go. Jackson, thanks for your time as always, man.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.